Leadership11.com.
Welcome to Leadership Role. I'm your host, Dr. Kitty, and today we'll be talking about building the Assault Army. Now, I really like Assault armies. Most of the armies I have, in fact, are Assault-based. Tyranids, the Blood Angels, Orcs, and all of them have advantages and disadvantages as being Assault armies. In fact, Assault armies in general have some inborn advantages, one of which is a successful assault wipes out the enemy in a turn, maybe two, and in the very least leaves them running. The nice thing about this is it's generally hard to cause enough casualties with shooting unless it's absolutely overwhelming or you're focusing your entire army on a single unit. Assault armies don't have this problem in general due to the fact that that one assault unit can take on one, maybe even more units at a time by itself, while the rest of the army can lend its support elsewhere. Another advantage that assault armies have, which I think is kind of obscure, is that they tend to take objectives with finality. When an assault unit takes an objective from the opposing troop, usually there isn't much else to defend that objective. Now, of course, this is situational. Depends upon how the opponent sets up his army. But in a lot of cases, I think you're going to find that a well-placed assault, especially against stranded units, means that you have that objective now. And personally, I think that the assault phase of the game is where all your real heroics come in. The sergeant charging in with his power fist against the hive tyrant and punching it out. It's part of the cinematic nature that I think Games Workshop wanted to put into the game, but they did make getting into Assault very difficult. Assault armies do have a number of disadvantages, one of which is when they do take an objective, if your assault units happen to be troops, or scoring in some way, usually they don't have the range to attack other enemies, which means they'll have to leave the objective to continue being effective. I have run into this, especially with my Tyranids. You can't just leave Hormigons sitting around an objective. They have to go forward and bite things or they're terrible. The other disadvantage to assault armies is just Overwatch, period. The flamer weapons are much better. That's why you see them more often. They're just D3 automatic hits. Sure, Overwatch snapfires, hitting on sixes to ballistic skill 1, but any casualties is a disadvantage for the assaulter, and every assault unit in general is going to be shot at least once before it gets to assault because of Overwatch. Another thing is that when you're in the assault phase, the enemies hit back, unlike shooting. And whereas that seems kind of obvious, sometimes it's difficult to remember that even Tau Fire Warriors can have a great round of rolling and actually beat up your Assault Marines. It happens. I've had Fire Warriors take out a Lord of Change. It's just the dice that it happens. But when you're building your Assault army, if you've decided to do that, I think you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. First off, is it going to be all Assault, every unit assaults, or is it going to be a strong Assault element? In general, I think the strong Assault element is better. It gives you more options for support, and it also gives you units to leave in your deployment zone, in your backfield, to hold on to objectives, and they're still effective because they have some range to them. Just like tactical squads work pretty well for this. It's not to say that all-out assault armies aren't fun, though. A Death Company army with no scoring units, just charging in there and trying to kill everything, is pretty amusing. And you'll often find that you have sneaky denial units, like maybe a chaplain or a character. Some Tyranid armies also work with the idea of being all assault. The Tyranid support isn't great against vehicles. The Hive Guard are pretty good, but Biovores, which are a great support unit for infantry, can't even touch most vehicles. So it isn't strange when there's a Tyranid army that is focused completely on assault. But no matter which way you decide to go with that, the next question you need to ask yourself is, how are they going to get there? You can't just set up 10 Khorne Berserkers and expect them to run across the field. They're going to die. There's really no reason not to shoot at them. However, 10 Berserkers and a Land Raider, that's something different. And those are some of the things that you can look at as far as getting them there. All assault armies benefit from mobility because they need mobility more than shooting. Shooting armies can just stand there and blast. Assault armies have to move to get into their effect, their field of effect, in order to cause casualties. One of the old concepts for assault was the delivery system. This was something like 30 boys and a knob. It's a knob delivery system. You really don't expect any of the boys to do any damage. You expect the knob to do all the damage with its power claw. Now you could do that with Hormagaunts and a Tyranid Prime, or even like a Blob Squad of IG with allied Space Marine character of some kind in there. However, due to the fact that there are challenges and such now, the delivery system might get your character into assault, but doesn't mean he's going to be effective. Another way to get your men into combat is with a vehicle, like the previously mentioned Land Raider or a Storm Raven. Both of those are superior due to the fact that they're also assault vehicles, which means your troops can disembark and assault in the same turn. Plus, they tend to have pretty decent anti-tank weaponry, so you can crack open some transports before they assault the tasty giblets inside. Other transport vehicles are recommended if you don't have access to them and you want your troops to actually be assaulting. But there are other options. The infiltrate or scout special rules at least allow you to get closer to the enemy. You can't assault on the first turn if you have these rules and you deploy by them. However, it's the first player turn, so if your opponent goes first, you can assault. And I've had some success with Blood Angel scouts in this manner, as they get to infiltrate and then make a scout move. Also, there's Deep Strike. You really have to pay attention to a unit of 10 Thunderhammer Terminators that appear in front of your army. You really have no choice, because if you don't, they're going to smash everyone. And that can also be a tactic for using your assault units. However, before you just jump right into the bloody melee, you might want to consider how you're supporting your units. Now, in an all-assault army, you're going to use your mobility as best you can to get into their face as soon as possible and just start killing them. Which means you're probably not going to have a lot by way of support. Again, like I say, the Tyranids do tend to do this, where they just jump in your face, maybe leave some nothing units on an objective in the background, like 10 Termagants with just flesh borers, something that doesn't matter. But Space Marine armies, and even Orc armies, generally will need some sort of support. These are usually things like Devastator squads, maybe a looted wagon, Ludas for orcs too. And the whole idea behind them is that they're going to soften up the units that are going to shoot at your assault element. The old adage goes, shoot the fighty stuff and fight the shooty stuff. However, now I think you might want to soften the shooty stuff with your shooty stuff. Also, support units can help break transports. Assault units can generally destroy transports. They'll have grenades or powerful weapons like Thunderhammers, or being monsters helps. But really, you probably want them fighting the troops inside, as in most cases, those troops are going to get a lot of shots on your assault unit if the assault unit is forced to destroy the transport. Plus, a long-range threat makes the assault more viable. If your opponent has to think about destroying your Devastator squads, your far-reaching shooters, your assault elements, which seem like they're a turn or so away, aren't as priority targets all the time. So in that way, support can also help your assaults. It's especially helpful if you have things like deep strikers or whatnot. And then it kind of works both ways, where now they have to kill the enemies close to them, ignoring the ones far from them. One of the tricks I've used myself with assault armies is things I call decoys and hammers. And usually I use this with my Tervagons for Tyranids, and it basically goes a small unit of Gaunts, usually Termagants because the Tervagons spawn them, will charge something I want to fight first. The reason being is that they're going to absorb the Overwatch. And if they decide not to shoot them, they'll move into combat, and therefore the enemy will be unable to perform an Overwatch if the Tervagon decides to go in too. Which, honestly, they don't always do. Even though a Tervagon is better in Assault than, say, a Riptide, the Riptide will put wounds on her. So you don't necessarily have to charge her in when you know that the Riptide isn't very good at combat. And this kind of works for a lot of things. Basically, any units that don't put out a lot of attacks, you can have your decoys just hold up until they're all killed, and then you charge in something better, usually a hammer. Another thing that's worked well is holding something with a unit and then hitting them with the hammer. So, for instance, Assault Marines out of a drop pod fighting some Tau to prevent them from being able to overwatch the Terminators that are coming in. It is situational and it can be difficult to do, but along with other assault tactics, such as their Overwatch can only kill one guy, it actually helps minimize the main disadvantage of Assault, which is Overwatch. So those are just some of my thoughts on an Assault army. I'd like to hear what you had to say. I know that in this edition of the game, they're not considered particularly viable, but I think that they still have a place in the game, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. So leave us some comments on Leadership 11, and we will talk to you later.